Hi, and welcome back to U.S. History with me, Mr. Snyder. And indeed, today we are going to start Chapter 18 with the Civil Rights Movement, and we'll talk about the early portion of the Civil Rights Movement today. So get your learning targets out and follow along, and let's begin. So there's two types of segregation going on in America. There's de jure segregation, and you can remember that because juror sounds like jury. And this is the type of segregation that's going on in the South. And the old case in 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson, makes this constitutional and legal. And so schools, hospitals, transportation, cemeteries, beaches, restaurants, waiting rooms, everything in the South is segregated by race. De jure segregated because it's by law. And then there is de facto segregation, or just segregation by custom, because that's the way it always has been. Blacks are denied housing and employment, and this is how it is in the North. So the North isn't this utopia where everybody holds hands and sings Kumbaya. There's still segregation going on in the North. It's just not by law. So here are some early efforts. In the North, black soldiers returned from World War II and are regarded as heroes, but in the South they are still segregated against, and President Truman does not find this pleasing. And so he issues Executive Order 9981 in July of 1948, and this establishes equality for all members of the armed services, no matter their race, religion, or country of origin. And we talked about executive orders before. They carry the same weight as a law, and they're issued by the president, who is the head of the executive branch of government. Jackie Robinson could be considered an early effort for racial equality. After World War II, he joins what is called the Negro Leagues, and the Negro Leagues are American baseball for black players. And Indianapolis had a team called the Indianapolis Clowns. They disbanded in 1988. And on April 15th, 1947, the Brooklyn Dodgers signed Jackie Robinson, and he makes his debut. He receives death threats, people yelling at him from the stands for this, and he is the first black player to play in the major leagues. And he's so good that in 1947 he wins baseball's Rookie of the Year award, and in 1949 he wins the National League Most Valuable Player. And today, number 42, they did this on the 50th anniversary in 1997, but number 42 is retired throughout baseball, and no player can wear it. And now some years on April 15th, to celebrate Jackie Robinson Day and Tax Day, they wear all players in the game wear number 42. Brown versus Board of Education, a landmark Supreme Court case. Parents of these racially segregated students in schools, they claim that these separate facilities are not equal as they're supposed to be. Of course they're not. And they point to the spending per student for every dollar spent on a white student, only like 19 cents is spent on a black student. And so blacks turn to the NAACP after the war for help. And the NAACP, remember, uses the courts to challenge segregation. And so Thurgood Marshall is the chief lawyer, or the chief counsel for the NAACP. And later on, he'll become the first African American appointed to the Supreme Court in the 60s. So the NAACP begins to challenge this segregation in courts, and they win a few smaller cases, and they decide to do the Brown case and go big. And so the Supreme Court is unanimous in their decision that this separate but equal education violates the U.S. Constitution. And Earl Warren is the Chief Justice here, and the Warren Court is known to be very liberal and make sure everybody's equal and fight for the little guy. This overturns the Plessy versus Ferguson decision, and this separate but equal becomes unconstitutional. And so segregation and discrimination are going to still continue for the next few decades because the South is going to kind of drag their feet on this whole integrating schools thing. And we'll get into some of the protests and conflicts over this right now. In Little Rock, Arkansas, Southern leaders, they have no intention of desegregating their schools, even though they're required to by law. So the Little Rock decides to integrate Central High School, and 9 blacks volunteer to enroll at this Central High School. And Governor Faubus, Orville Faubus, one of the great Southern names in U.S. history, he uses the National Guard to block the school doors. And a white mob is waiting outside the school ready to lynch these black students for wanting to go to school with these with their white children. And you can see the angry faces on these white people in this picture. Just this young girl just wants to go to school. That's it. And they are treating her like she is insane and horrible. And so President Eisenhower says we are going to enforce the law. So he sends federal troops to protect these students the whole year. They walk them to school, they pick them up every morning, they take them to class. And due to this, Congress passes one of the first Civil Rights Act, or the first one since Reconstruction after the Civil War, the Civil Rights Act of 1957. And this creates the Civil Rights Commission, which investigates civil rights abuses. And so this Little Rock 9 is pretty important as far as the integrating of Southern schools goes. And then finally, we get to the Montgomery bus boycott. And this is the Rosa Parks incident, which I want to name my band after that eventually one day. Colored sections are located in the backs of buses in Montgomery, Alabama. And there's a sign that could be moved backward and forward at the driver's discretion, kind of as the line where blacks need to sit behind this line. So more whites got on the bus and they request Rosa to move to the black section, and she does not. So this is December 1st, 1955. She's on her way home from work. She sits in the first row reserved for colored people. And Rosa does not move. The police are then called and Parks is arrested. And on why she didn't move, quote, "I would have to know once and for all what rights I had as a human being and a citizen of Montgomery, Alabama." And here you can see she's being arrested and fingerprinted. So a meeting is called at the local by the local NAACP leader at Reverend Martin Luther King's church. And he is chosen to lead the boycott. He's a young, vivacious minister, full of energy. And so the Montgomery bus boycott lasts over a year. And in a form of non-violent protest, blacks refuse to ride the bus for over a year. This means the city of Montgomery is going to lose a lot of money because blacks comprise 75% of their daily riders. And so there's just empty buses going around Montgomery, Alabama. They walk, they hitchhike, they carpool, they use bicycles, cars, even mules a few times to get to where they were going. And so here are some things people did in support of the boycotts. Black churches collect used shoes to donate to the black citizens of Montgomery since their shoes were being worn out so quickly. And after this national pressure, the Supreme Court rules this practice unconstitutional. And this gives Martin Luther King Jr. the national attention he needs to become a leader of the civil rights movement. And in this, a few organizations are formed. His whole idea is soul force, or non-violent resistance. He takes this from the people of history like Gandhi, who non-violently resisted the British being a part of India and colonizing India. And he forms the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which is focuses on a non-violent grassroots movement in southern towns in order to end segregation practices. And that's where we're going to end today. So make sure you fill out those learning targets, and I will see you back in class. Goodbye.